Hey, what's going on, everybody? What you're about to see is a really phenomenal interview with AJ Tucci. Really great conversation. But we had a little technical difficulties before we started filming, some audio issues, and in the crux of the audio issues, I gotta be honest, I forgot to press record for the first 10 minutes of the video. So the first 10 minutes of video have no video, but there is audio, and then after the first 10 minutes, the rest of the interview has full video and audio connected. So I apologize, but I hope it doesn't interfere with your viewing. Just put it on in the background, take a listen, or close your eyes and listen, and hope you enjoy it. Phenomenal one you don't want to miss out on. Also, as a reminder, the Jacob Restituto tickets for the concert I'm putting on October 7th in New York are available. Consider go checking them out. It means so much to me to see you there, either online or in person. Check him out, link down below. Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jacob Restituto, and I'm a musician from Northport, New York, and today we have the absolute pleasure of having AJ Tucci here on the channel. New York, LA, collabing on a chat today, so I appreciate you, AJ. Thank you so much for taking the time to chat, man.
Yeah, you're very welcome, Jacob. Actually, I grew up in Boston, so East Coast
Ah,
connection via the two coasts.
for real, but we hate your guts in sports, bro.
Oh, I know it's cute. Y'all in your 26
Ah!
World Series.
Well, it
It's
depends. I
cute.
guess it depends on what sport we're talking, because like as a Jets fan, we hate the Patriots, but and I mean same Boston and Yankees, like the Red Sox and Yankees, or the Red Sox, right? However you guys
Yeah,
pronounce
there
it.
it is. There it is. Yeah, in the Bronx, in the
Yeah,
Bronx.
for real, man. That's too funny.
Uh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I remember being little, watching all those like Red Sox
Oh
games.
man.
Oh yeah, just hating the Yankees.
100%, bro. Same thing about the
Yeah.
Boston teams. Oh, it's too funny. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. You're not in Boston anymore, so we don't have to worry about the tension anymore. So,
No tension.
oh man, good stuff. Well, thank you very much for taking the time. For people that aren't familiar with you, can you give a little backstory on who you are and your time in the music industry? Take it as
For
far back
sure.
as you'd like and tell your story.
Yeah, I mean, I guess music's been a thing my whole life since like grade school, playing instruments, violin, cello, things like that, drums when I was a little bit older, and then I guess things became more serious. Things definitely became more serious when I moved to LA, and I decided I want to pursue like engineering and production. I was doing things in GarageBand when I was in Boston with like kids at the high school and college I was going to. So that's kind of when the production journey actually started. But professionally, it started when I moved to LA, went to school at Musicians Institute, took their course, had an internship with the studio after that. Internship turned to a part time engineering position. Part time engineering turned into a full time engineering position. Started working for myself more after that. And yeah, I've been basically super blessed and fortunate to have been in beautiful studios for the past 10 years. My home studio that I've been incorporating and developing. Yeah, and meeting a lot of great people along the way. That's kind of one of the best parts, I'd say.
Yeah, absolutely. Dude,
Yeah.
meeting people along the way is such a fun part, man. Like the music industry isn't anything without the cool people you get to meet in it for sure, right?
100%. Yeah, it takes a whole village. It takes a whole
Yeah,
village. And for people who don't understand that, it's like, oh, how many people does it take to make this 3 minute song? It's like, well, it takes a lot, you know? It's an idea that I could make a great song by myself. You can make a great song by yourself, but like we would never make the song that together we would make unless we were together.
sure. Yeah,
You know?
absolutely, man. So a little bit of context on that. What's the timeline of you moving from Boston to LA to all those steps that you had mentioned? Was it a year each? Was it 10 years? Was it 5 years? What does that look like?
Yeah. So I moved out. It was 2013. It was like spring 2013. I want to say it was like March or April. School was 6 months, and they had an option for like a 3 month master program or advanced program in either live sound or like studio work. And I already had an internship at that point, and I was already like in the studio. So I was like, I'm not going to go back to school. This is where I want to be. So basically, when they let me in the door, I never left.
Hmm.
Essentially, the internship program was probably like 6 to 9 months. The assistant position was probably closer to 2 years. Learned a lot from a lot of the engineers on staff at that time. That was such a great experience. And then so full time engineering after that. for the last couple of years get blurry because of the pandemic and
Sure.
everything, but it's like, yeah, like 6, 7 years.
Yeah. And I saw that
Yeah.
you were with a major label for a while, and then during the pandemic, you left the major label and started working on yourself, correct?
Correct. Yeah. So 2020 happened. Basically, a lot of contracts were terminated. And I was fortunate enough to be working independently freelance with an artist through 2020, through 2021. And that was great because when everyone basically was locked inside, I was kind of spoiled. I was going to Malibu almost every day at a beautiful scene, a beautiful studio. And it was kind of forgot what was happening outside, which typically happens, when you're in a session, but when the world seemed very unrecognizable, it was a good escape,
Mm-hmm.
great escape.
For sure.
Yeah, and yeah, funny enough, I'm actually back with the major. I've been back since like summer 2021. Then wrapped up with another independent gig also. So I've been
So
juggling those two
how does that
things.
work? Can you elaborate on that? Like, so as an engineer or producer, how are you? How do they sign you? Like, how does a major label sign you, or how do you contract with them?
It's a typical like an employment agreement.
Okay.
It's not like anything up front or anything. It's just, the sessions you work, the sessions you get paid for.
So essentially, they have
It works.
producers or engineers on staff. Then essentially.
Yeah, so the label has producers that are signed. And it's the same thing with engineers, but you're not signed. It's like you're one of their house engineers, if you will. You show up to XYZ studio. This person works at X studio. This person works at Y. If you go to Z, you'll see this guy.
Hmm.
And we had, before the pandemic, we had a staff of maybe like 15 or so. And there was a weird transition where the label that I was working with, there was a transition with ownership. So I'm now at the same label, but it's kind of run with a different management, if you
Mm-hmm.
will. So now we have a staff maybe that's closer to like eight or 10.
And then does that major label have their own? Do they have their own studio that like their artists record at, or do they like sub out studios essentially?
So the traditional method was always, go to the commercial studios, have your session there, yada yada. And then I don't know when exactly the shift happened, but the shift from commercial studios to label studios happened. And now a lot of these labels have their own
Oh,
studio.
commercial studio would be like Abbey Road Studio versus say like
Exactly.
Columbia,
Record
Warner
plant.
Brothers, Atlantic, anything like that.
Right.
Interesting,
Right. So
interesting.
yeah. Atlantic has a studio in Hollywood. Atlantic has a studio in New York. Um, I'm sure other labels adapt that same
Yeah,
business model. It
yeah.
kind of makes sense to keep overhead down. If you just instead of
Sure.
renting a room per the day or per the month, you're just owning a facility essentially.
Yeah, it's super interesting actually. So what's cool about that is for people that are interested in following that similar path of being an engineer or producer, it's cool that there are so many different paths. You can work independently. You can actually work either via employment or being signed to a label. There's not just these cookie cutter options. You could do both, like you are, which is a really it's kind of it opens the I don't think a lot of people think that you can get signed or contracted by these major labels as an engineer. Like it's not something that automatically pops into your mind. Everybody just thinks it's DIY, doing it yourself the whole time. But it's kind of cool that you can almost to some degree have the stability of a job, a 9 to 5 job, while doing what you love inside the music industry, right?
Yeah, 100%. I guess the big perk of those label gigs is like you're kind of fishing in stock ponds. So they are providing the clientele, you're just providing the service.
Yeah,
And when you're freelancing and you're an independent contractor, which I highly push everyone in the field to kind of like take that route. If you're not like hustling for your own self, closed mouths don't get fed. If you're not asking or looking for work, you're not going to get all the work that you could be receiving or
for
getting.
sure, man.
So yeah, it was great. And the great part of the label gig is that like the connections you make in those sessions through the label, they don't always end there. They
Hmm.
typically don't. If you're good at what you do, those people want to work with you again.
Yeah,
So if that means if it's inside the label through the same agreement, cool. If it means like, oh, we're going to New York next week,
yeah,
come with, like,
yeah,
cool.
yeah. No, it's super interesting, and it leads back to the relation the beginning of this conversation. I don't remember if we were talking about it before or after we started filming, but the relationships are everything, man. Like the people you meet along the journey are the whole thing. So I noticed that you do a lot of mainly two things on your credits list, I guess we'll call it. It's either engineering or vocal engineering. And I'd love to hear if you explain personally the difference between the two of them.
Yeah, for sure. So when you're in that engineer seat, you always have to keep in mind you are assisting a process. You are assisting the client through their creative process. It's their song at the end of the day, and you're there to try to reflect that image that they have in their head through the speakers. So it's a selfless act. And that's kind of how I always approach it. I always try to like remove myself from the equation when engineering and just like do the gig as efficiently as possible. Make things sound great at the end of the night. Get things edited as much as possible. Put a nice rough mix on it. And then the vocal production thing is like a little bit more of a trust between you and the client, where they're looking for feedback maybe, or you have feedback, you're hearing something different. Oh, hey, that note's flat right there. Watch your vowel at this moment.
Mm.
Make it a little more bouncy. Watch your swing. And all that is just that's time on the mat, years in the chair kind of thing. And really what it is, it's building that trust with the person on the mic, So it's sessions and hours spent together with a client, really.
Yeah. I'd love to hear your perspective on how much of a difference that makes, having that personal relationship, in the sense of like, what are some things, I mean, you mentioned a couple of them right there, but like, what are some things you personally notice, like you would talk about, in the sense of, you mentioned vowel placement, or, what are those things that you're looking for to improve an artist's performance when recording?
Oh, it's every day, every session's always going to be a little different.
Sure.
So if you go in with that like template mindset of what a good record sounds like to you, you might be in the right direction 80% of the time, and then that 20% of the time you might be banging your head against the wall. So always try to keep an open mind when the day starts. My Pro Tools sessions and the day start look very I just try to like keep the scope wide, and then as the day goes on, I start to narrow down on what the tone or vibe of the record is starting to feel like.
Yeah.
But yeah, I try to, like I said, I try to remove myself a lot from the equation, and when I'm recording, obviously I want to make sure I'm getting a good level, my compressor's hitting nice, the gain structure's right, and then basically I'll start to just listen to that person once I feel comfortable with that engineering step. And if anything hits me where I'm like, oh, that feels a little weird, I might run another take, or we're definitely going to run another take, but the next take we'll listen again at that little moment. I might not even say anything, but 2 takes go by, I'm not hearing a change in that moment, I'll be like, hey, this next take, can we try this maybe this way? And then let's see how that reacts. And then I'm kind of a path of least resistance kind of guy. If it's not working, it's probably not meant to be. If you're working too hard at it, you're probably doing something that maybe you don't need to do. Where I'm at. And then sometimes you do have to put the elbow grease in, don't get me wrong, where it's like, oh man, that note's flat, you got to hit that note for me. And we
I'm
stand,
curious about that actually. So how much of it is you in a session like that is you tuning somebody versus like live, like, hey, hit that note kind of thing, and how much of it does that make a difference? We're getting a little geeky now, because like as an artist and like somebody that produces my own music, I'm like, I want to learn, bro. Here I am.
No, it's cool. Yeah, I love talking shop.
Yeah, for real.
It's funny. We can do so much in post these days. We really can. Melodyne's super powerful, vocal line, things like that, super powerful. Me personally, I always, you got to think energy first. And if someone's just not tight with a performance, you can do all you want afterwards. But if it's just not tight, it's not going to be tight afterwards. You're polishing a turd is the typical saying,
Yeah.
And fortunately, it's like I would never say like I'm working with like turd clients,
Yeah.
but it's like you know what potential is there, and we're really looking to make those incremental improvements.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like this one big huge thing that's all of a sudden going to make the record fucking pop.
Yeah.
Sorry for cussing,
You
but
be you, man. It's all good.
cool.
Yeah, it's
Um,
really interesting that you said that. The one thing really stuck out is the fact that you said that, the thing you're really looking for is the correct energy for the song. Because you listen to some songs, actually, and some aren't tuned perfectly, but they have the proper energy, and you don't care necessarily. Or if they were tuned properly, like you take a song like Mr. Brightside, right? Like classic hit. Every time anybody it comes on, people freak out, right? Like
great
that's
record,
not what. What was it?
great record.
Hey, for real. I mean, rightfully so, right? But like, that's not perfectly in tune. And if it was, it wouldn't feel right. You know what I mean?
100%, 100%. And I think it. We're talking about like specific tuning of vocals,
Sure.
like someone's pitch. Oh, 100%. There's so many instances throughout music history or whatever you want to call it, where the vocal is like the human element of the song. You tune guitar strings, you tune a
Mm.
piano, even tune drums. Toms and everything. They're all kind of like tuned, and then you're not up until like auto tune. You weren't tuning the microphone per se. So you look at like, oh my God, I think Bob Dylan's first example, like out of tune vocals. Trent Reznor, not tuned vocals,
Mm.
great records. Bradley from Sublime, not super in tune. Misfits, not super in tune. Tom Petty, not super in tune. Yeah, so it's genre specific for sure. But also,
Yeah, that
I
is
think
kind of interesting. A lot of those were in that rock, raw genre kind of thing. That is super interesting. But I continue.
no, it's definitely that genre thing where it's like, oh, we're not looking to be perfect.
Uh huh.
Contemporary, where we're at right now, I do feel like the ear has adjusted to things that sound more perfect. And if
Mm-hmm.
it sounds out of tune, it better be for a good reason. Where
Mm.
we're at right now, you know?
Yeah, and it's super interesting, man. Like one of my biggest cruxes with the music industry at the moment is that we like claim things are live when they're not actually live anymore. Like it'll be so and so pop artist live at Abbey Road, and it's like there's no like you could totally tell, like as somebody that like pitches vocals and knows what like things sound like, you can tell when something's been pitched because it's perfect, and
Right.
and it's like that as an artist bothers me because when I was growing up, before doing all this stuff, man, I put in hours into working my voice, right? And then to hear these artists be like, they're perfect, be like, I'll never be that good. You know what I mean? But then I found out like years later, like, neither are they. And I was like so
No,
furious. I'm like, here I was trying to hit this standard, and like they're not even at that standard. It's a false standard. So, but it's interesting how we're trained to hear that. So if the listener doesn't hear that, they're almost like, oh, what's up with this singer kind of thing. It doesn't feel right. Like it's just
it doesn't
interesting.
feel finished.
Yeah, exactly.
100%. Yeah, it's just I mean, it's the tools we have available to us right
Mm.
now. It's like even the best singers in the world use autotune or Melodyne and things like that. And I just think that's the contemporary record. It's the like vocal production. Anthony Kiedis, new Red Hot Chili Pepper album, the whole album done to tape, except for Anthony's vocals.
Hmm.
So that's just where we're at with how we consume records. I feel is like everything. The band has been playing together for 30 plus years. That band's going to be tight. We can do things in tape a little bit in post, but like the performance needs to be there if you're
Yeah.
going to be doing it to tape.
Yeah.
So the band got it down. We need to get Anthony's vocals right. Let's do takes. We'll comp it
So
in Pro
interesting.
Tools.
Yeah.
We'll make it fit the vibe.
Yeah.
But it's just, I mean, you can look at his vocal through the years, and this isn't something obviously I was examining through the years, but taking a step back over like the past year or so, I'm like, damn, you listen to a Red Hot Chili Pepper album over the course of decades, you're like, whoa, this is how far vocal production has gone. Just how like he sounds over the course of his career.
Mm.
like a great scientific experiment with
Yeah,
vocal
I mean,
production. I feel.
100%. After this, I have an hour drive, dude. Everything we've referenced, I'm gonna go listen back to all this stuff and just try to like dissect it, man. It's so interesting. But
For sure, like Blood Sugar Sex Magic, Stadium Arcadium, and then this most recent one, those would be like
yeah,
three little quick little snippets to listen to. You'd be like, whoa, that sounds different now.
yeah, and to some degree, almost this conversation kind of almost reminds me of like when stereo first came out. Like you listen to like Beatles albums before, or any album actually, like in that area, the time frame before stereo came out, and then when stereo came out, like they didn't know what to do with it, so they like overcompensated, and the whole, entire drum kit is in the right ear, and the entire vocal is in the left ear, and the drums in the guitars in the center. It's like, well, it sounds for me as like now it's miserable to listen to because I'm like, what is going on? You
It's
know,
jarring.
it
It's
is,
super
but like
jarring.
it's almost very similar. Where it's like we have these new tools now, and we're like almost going like balls to the wall with it, and then we'll probably find the balance later. You know, I mean,
Oh,
what is that?
100%.
70 years since stereo came out. You know, so
Yeah,
and
that
we're
sounds, yeah.
only what maybe 20 since like actual like vocal production as we know it today is available.
Yeah, like I know Pro Tools is like early thousands. I know Butch Vig was using it on that first Nirvana album, and that, I mean, I'm sure it was used before then too, but like that's kind of the birth of the
Yeah,
digital thing.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's just interesting. It's gonna be interesting to see because to some degree I almost feel like we had that serious like very bubblegum pop era where everything was super perfect. Even strings, we're like, let's use fake strings, synthesized strings instead, right? It wasn't even like real strings anymore. Like, and I feel like we that's that like balls to the wall extreme, and then we've kind of slowly starting to pull away from it to some degree. It's also really interesting to see how pop music is kind of shifting from bubblegum pop to like now this like which I love the fact that we're shifting that a little bit more towards like this pop punk early 2000s kind of vibe. And I'm like, I'm
Hmm.
here for it, bro, because I'm like, I'm ready to rock again. That was my favorite genre.
Yeah, it's the trend is timeless. That just proves it's timeless. Like it's been like 20-ish years, not even, and it's back. It's like,
I love it. It's slow. It's like slowly coming back. Like I hate it or love it. Like I feel like the Machine Gun Kelly started that kind of genre. Like and then but like even the new Olivia Rodrigo album like has that early 2000s vibe. The Paramore kind of vibe and stuff. Like it's becoming
mhm.
popular, and I'm like totally here for it, man. It's so sick. But even
It's super dope.
sorry, continue. Go for it.
No, I was just gonna say it's super dope. It just reminds me of youth
For
or
real.
early thousand vibes for sure.
But now this is a cool scientific experiment, as you'd say. Like looking at that music, you know, Boys Like Girls, or all those bands back then, the Killers, or anything like that. Even though the Killers are still around, like that pop punk rock genre compared to that same now pop genre today, you could see the tremendous advancements in production that we have now. Like the same
Oh,
genre, but it's like way more crisp.
yeah, just the fidelity of everything has just gone up, and yeah, it's things are just hitting harder. I know the drums are going to be more tight, the vocals are going to be more crispy. You know, and we're probably using some 808s now, so it's the bass is kicking.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What do you look for in engineering and production, like to make like to advance, your sound? Like, what are things that you're like, okay, this is gonna bring the track to the next level?
It's a layer thing, I guess, for me. The approach is always changing. Every record's a little different, but the recent approach has been what kind of cool layers can we layer this thing up with, whether it be like a crunchy, distorted thing that we're going to tuck in there, or this crazy verb splash on that word, or we're going to double the bass with a super compressed thing, and
Mm.
that's going to make it feel a little bit bigger. Try to think like filling the spectrum, and let the sounds hit your ears and spirit as honestly as possible, and what needs to get done from there. If the bass is too much, how do we tame the bass while still keeping the thump? How do we get the drums hitting super hard without losing the bounce, and the vocals get tucked in there just right?
Oh man, I'm getting a headache thinking of all these things because it's like the never-ending goal of like, wow, this sounds cool, but this could be a little tighter, and like, how in the world do I do that kind of thing? You know, it's a constant, it's like constant whack-a-mole battle. You know.
100%, 100%. It's always kind of going yourself, but what if?
Yeah, and then you do
But
it,
what if?
and then there's a new what if. Like it's like, oh, the bass is too fat. Let's pull it in a little, brighten it up. But then it's like, oh, now you know the drums that sound thin. Like it just that new whack a mole pops up a new problem. You're just constantly.
100%. Especially in the mix phase, you can be chasing your own tail. One thing is always going to negate another. You know, you turn that hi hat down, all of a sudden your vocal feels like it's on top.
Mm-hmm.
You turn that kick drum down, all of a sudden your bass feels like it's too loud. You know, you turn that guitar up, all of a sudden it's like, where's the vocal? And then it's just
Oh, man.
it's a constant balance of the distribution of powers in a mix.
Yeah, that's a great reference. Like great way to phrase it. Absolutely. Oh
Yeah.
man, that's too funny. What do you like in these days? Like, what kind of music are you know really? Who do you think is making this really good music, and why?
I've kind of cycled through a like an indie rock kind of thing right now. I've been listening to Petey for like what feels like almost a year. That he put out an album last year. It was called Lean Into Life. Yeah, super indie rock. He even mentions it in one of his songs. It's like it's the feeling of youth, and he's like probably 30 something, but he just kind of like captured this little motion that just feels great to me. It's like super
Mhm.
organic with synthesizers, super catchy melodies and songs. It's lighthearted, but it's not. It's good. It's just good music to me. It's just very lighthearted. It's easy listening.
Hmm.
Yeah.
In your perspective, what do you find is makes it like a good song? Like if you had a like retrospectively or introspectively look, be like, this is a good song because.
Because it just hits you. I mean, what I think is a good song is going to be different than what you
Ain't
think.
that the
And, you
truth?
know, it's just that connection you feel to that story, to that guitar lick, to that bass line, just to the
Mm-hmm.
sonics, what's hitting your ears. It's like, oh, he's making a record. He's telling me a story. He's selling me this idea.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah. And like, I definitely my relationship towards consumption of music has changed over the past 10 years just because being around so much music. Typically, it's like my favorite songs these days are the songs no one's heard of or no
Mm.
one's like heard yet. Maybe it's like, oh, it's coming out next month. Oh, that's my favorite song right now. My favorite song is always the next one. The
Oh,
next
that's
one I'm
so
working on. That's
fascinating.
my
Yeah,
like next favorite song. Yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
like, oh, how do we make this the next best thing that
yeah.
we
Or
did?
like to
You
some
know?
degree, you're hearing music way before it comes out. So you know it could be your favorite song for 3 4 months before anybody else has heard it, and by the time everybody else has
Yeah.
heard it and it's now top of the charts, you're like, yo, that song 9 months old, bro. I'm done with it, kind of thing.
Oh, 100%, 100%. My favorite music to listen to is unreleased music, and then once it's out, it's like, oh, that's for them now.
Uh huh.
That's for them now. Yeah.
Sure.
I definitely catch myself like bumping stuff I've worked on because just the memories attached to some of those
Mm.
days, nights, long nights, early mornings, whatever it was. You know, the memories attached to those sessions when you worked on that. You know, the conversation that you had that day, or you know, that effect you did in that song is like, oh, that was cool, that was different. You know, like
That is such a great way to phrase that because I don't think people totally like I totally relate to that, and I don't think people totally like non musicians totally understand that because you know people wouldn't judge a chef for eating their own food, right? But as soon as you're like a musician and now you're listening to your own music, they're like, you know, this narcissist, like, you know, all he cares about is, and it's like, hold on a sec, like, why can a chef, you know, why can a photographer have their photo as their background on their phone, but like, why can't I bump my own music, kind of thing? You know what I mean? But that's a phenomenal way to put it. The memories attached to it. You're proud of it.
100%. Yeah.
Reminiscing how you got that sound, the conversation you had while writing the song. That is such a phenomenal way to put that. Exactly. That's exactly how you feel.
Yeah, it's so funny how like we get a bad rap if we play our own song, but there are those people who overplay their own stuff. It's like,
Well,
all right,
there,
bro,
yeah,
maybe, yeah.
yeah,
There's always the exception.
yeah,
But yeah, it's like I worked on that song, and like we're making music that I'd rather hear the music that we're making than the music someone else making.
uh-huh,
Typically, you
yeah,
know what I'm saying? That's why we're making it. It's like
mm,
let's make something that's not just like we're gonna enjoy, but hopefully a lot of people
yeah.
enjoy.
And it's almost your own personal nostalgia. Like you know how like music is one of those things that brings you back to a time and place. Well, like why like your own music's doing that probably that much more.
100%, 100%. When you hear a song, it might take you, 5 listens to get the lyrics. When you're part of making a song,
Yeah,
you know all the lyrics before the night's over.
100%.
You're singing it back while it's on playback, and I'm editing, and like I'm singing. I know what lines coming next.
Mm,
It's ingrained in you that much more. It's
mm-hmm,
like it's part of the alchemy. You start every session with like, unless you're doing like a rewrite or something, you start every session with a blank slate
mm-hmm,
with an idea, and then the day or night turns into how do we make this idea, this thing we're all hearing or the client's hearing, how do we make this idea real?
mm-hmm,
How do we get this idea to come through the speakers
mm-hmm.
that makes it feel captivating, and that makes it feel like it's the next thing that people need to hear.
Yeah, totally, man. It's so interesting. Super techie questions for you now. Talking
Okay.
vocal engineering and just engineering in general. If for the people that are listening and want to improve their mixes, improve the quality, the perceived quality, I guess we'll say, not necessarily songwriting or anything like that, but the quality of the mix, right? What are 3 things that you noticed vocally in the engineering process or in the recording process, whatever you decide to talk on, that can make a big difference in the quality of sound, or quality as in like professionalism, if you want to use that term, right?
For sure, for sure. There's a lot that goes into the editing process, and that's going to be genre specific too. You'll notice the indie rock
Mm.
records have less editing going on than pop records. A lot that goes into the editing process, a lot that goes into the layering process. Also, if you're looking to make a pop record, you better be willing to stack damn near all your vocals at least 2 times, probably more.
Let's
Where
elaborate
we're
on
at,
that a
we're at,
little bit because I think that's a really interesting misconception to some degree that most people don't realize is happening. I'd love to hear you explaining that for people that might not be familiar with that.
with stacking vocals.
Yeah, particularly in pop records.
Yeah, yeah. So I see a lot of sessions where it's just like I'm a big session hygiene freak. When I open my Pro Tool session, it kind of comes from my background because being on a team of 12 guys
Mm, mm,
with a growing list of writers, artists, producers, I might start a session that my buddy might need to open 6 months from now.
yeah.
So when he opens it, I want him to have a decent understanding of what the hell's going on.
It's not track 1
So
through 64, title track 1 through 64.
exactly, it's not audio one
Yeah.
dupe, ba 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 ba. Obviously, things get out of hand sometimes
Yeah, sure.
when things are going on. But so I would preach session cleanliness to any like new young engineer or
Yeah.
whatever. Session cleanliness, and
It's a
then
nightmare after the fact if you don't. You try to bounce
oh
stems,
yeah,
and you yourself have to be like, oh, what is this, man? Oh, it's a nightmare.
100%. Yeah,
It's a
if you're the
nightmare.
guy who recorded it and like you don't know where your lead vocal is, we're starting off on the wrong foot.
It's a
And then if I'm
nightmare.
opening it, I'm definitely not going to know where your lead vocal is. I'm going to try my best to be like, oh, that one sounds the strongest or whatever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my
That's the lead
gosh. Yeah.
vocal now,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. For sure.
So first and foremost, session cleanliness. If something's on a lead track, it should be the lead vocal. There's only one of those. That's why it's called the lead. And then from there, you might have an ad lib track. That's kind of like its own thing. That's kind of like a lead. And then from there, you're kind of stacking and supplementing vocals. So when I say stack, the first thing that comes to mind is like a double of the lead vocal, which is kind of just like it is what it sounds like. It's like you try to duplicate that performance as close as possible. and then that gives that lead vocal support. I think of recording harmonies. So we record, oh, what note are we doing here? It's the third. Cool, let's get this third harmony. All right, let's get that same harmony again. You know, let's do it 2 more times. So we have that harmony note recorded 4 times that we're gonna get it sounding like one vocal, and then let's get the 5th. All right, Beatles 3-part harmony. Where's that like flat 7 or whatever it is? Whatever it is. So all that gets recorded multiple times, usually at least twice. Most times these days it's 4 times. And then, we have this cool vocal choir pad idea with these oohs and these ahs. Let's get these oohs and ahs. Same thing. It's like, all right, we're recording this 4 times. It's all going to get edited really tight together, make it feel like one ooh and ah, so on and so forth. And then, gang vocals. All right, new bus for these gang vocals. Let's all get on the mic. Let's turn the mic to Omni. Hey, I hear you too much of this guy. You need to face the other way, so on and so forth. So there's so much. There's a lot of recording when you're, especially with like a contemporary pop sounding vocal production. It's a lot of vocals that might get bounced down in the stems that will be affected as a group at the end of the day. But it's a lot of recording. It's a lot of recording. It could be hours, at least 2 hours, just recording backgrounds. That's why it's like always a good time to take a break after you get the lead, edit the lead up real nice, and then all right, let's stack to this lead vocal and see what we can figure out now. Like, what's the next step of this?
Yeah, that's super interesting. So, going even farther in depth, you're saying typically if we hear, a third harmony, for those that are not familiar, we're talking third harmony, meaning a third interval, an interval of a third,
Yes.
not like a number 3, interval of a third harmony, which would be like do and mi, right? So hearing that third harmony left ear, right? You're saying in that left ear third harmony where there's 4 vocals being stacked, kind of making it to sound like it's one.
Yeah. However
Typically,
you want to pan it out. Typically, yeah. There's no hard, fast rules to any of this.
But you're not saying like it's one here, one here, one here, and one here. You're saying it's all that one vocal you're hearing is typically 4-layer like that. That's what you mean by layering, correct?
Correct. Yeah, and that goes into preference also.
Sure.
Me personally, I'm like, this is super nerdy, but I'm a proponent of left, right, center kind of for everything. If I want it in the left channel, I'm going to pan it hard left. If I want it in the right channel, I'm going to pan it hard right. If it's in the middle, it's in the middle. And then the things that I have on the side, I might use stereo imaging from there. So typically when I do stacks, if it's like a harmony thing, I'll pan 2 vocals hard left, 2 vocals hard right. So I have this even distribution between the 2 speakers. And then they might be going to their own bus, and in their bus, I might bring them closer to the middle. I might, like you said, bring them all to one side. I might put hella reverb on them so they feel ghostly. I might make them super dark so they feel spooky, or so on and so forth.
It's so wild, man. All the different things that people don't realize go into making that one. We were just talking background vocals, right? One harmony we were talking about. On that one harmony, all the different things you were talking about, man. It's absurd. Now,
yeah, it's that what if thing. It's just like, let's dig deeper. Let's dig deeper.
Yeah. So now with the alignment of those vocals, once you start, I would love to hear your tips on aligning the vocals. You have now all these stacks. What are you doing to align them?
Vocal line's probably going to be your best friend. Yeah, vocal line does a great job. Melodyne does a great job. Super powerful. People think Melodyne and they think tuning vocals right away, but there's also timing in Melodyne, which is really user friendly. Definitely easier and better to use than Pro Tools.
And then Melodyne has a different levels where I think there's one that is just tuning, and then there's like you can keep buying the next package, and at a certain package you can actually see all your vocals in there, correct?
And it's the highest package. I want to say studio or editor, and you can tune like essentially multiple tracks at once, kind of deal. Vocal line is going to give you mostly your timing benefits. There is some tuning now within vocal line, which is really convenient too. Instead of having Melodyne every track, if it's just a double, you can be like Melodyne the lead, and then this vocal line is also going to do the pitch and the timing.
Melodyne is rather inconvenient in the fact that you have to print everything that you use. essentially, or you leave it
Well,
running the whole
yeah,
time. But it's no
yeah,
different
no.
than recording the tape. You had to print everything you were doing back there.
100%, 100%. And that's like going back to just like I feel like the engineering gig is doing a lot of things that are going to keep you out of trouble. So yeah, you're going to commit that melodyne, but if you duplicate your playlist before you get rid of your source vocal is going to be there in the playlist anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So you can always go back to it. Just leaving that insurance for yourself where you can be
Mm.
like, oh, I'm not worried about committing this because I have the source right here in this playlist, or I have the
What do you mean
source right
by
here.
duplicating your playlist?
So in Pro Tools, basically, like you have the track you're looking at, and then on that same track, you can. I think Logic they call it the same thing. It's like playlisting. So like on that same track, you can see all the tracks that were either recorded on that track or playlisted on that track. So like I'm looking at a track, it's like, oh, I want to make this vocal line or this melodyne. Those two things are destructive. So you're gonna lose the audio that you're looking at. But if you playlist it, you just duplicate the audio so it exists on the same track, but you're not looking at it. And if
Mm.
you need to look at it, you open up the track, you see the source
Very
audio.
interesting.
You can use the source audio in replacement of the Melodyne audio.
I
Or
learned something
maybe
new
it's
today.
just that word. It doesn't have to be
Mm.
the whole thing. You can comp in between the two.
Mm. Very interesting. That's actually pretty cool. I
Yeah,
gotta look into that. I'm a Logic user, so I gotta look into that. But that's
I know Logic has it. I think Ableton has it now. I think it's one of the newer features.
that's pretty
That's
wild,
been my
actually.
most Yeah, it's been my most recent DAW adventure. Has been trying to learn some Ableton.
Ableton, interesting.
Yeah,
I was
yeah.
actually thinking today about Ableton Live in the sense of like live performance and just what it does with like looping and stuff and all those different things. Who knows? I was on a run. I was like just kind of going down a rabbit hole of live performance ideas with Ableton Live.
Yeah, I know it's super with the trigger and everything. If you're
Yeah,
going to be up there like triggering scenes, I know it works pretty smooth. I know a lot of people are in Ableton programming shows.
because
Yeah, it seems to be kind of like that standard for the
yeah,
live.
well, yeah, for sure. It's definitely the industry standard. There's a lot of interesting things with, especially with like looping and stuff, where like you start looping and then you go out of time. It almost quantizes it for you, so that you're not, which is an interesting kind of idea, just to mess around with. But who knows? It's a
Yeah,
whole
that's the
rabbit
I
hole
know.
that you start running down.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's it takes so long to feel proficient for me at
Mm,
least in one DAW, and then it's like feeling like you're a beginner again in something else. It's a good feeling. It's good to
yeah.
feel like you're a beginner. I feel because it just means like you're learning, and it's always good to be
Well, that
learning.
goes back to the very first thing you and I said before we even started recording, where I said, "Hey, actually, let's hold this for the filming," because we were you said like always stay like a student. You said always be learning, and I was like, that's a phenomenal tip, and that's I actually wanted to repeat that now is, always be trying to find something new, always be trying to learn something. And as an artist, that's why I like to release so much music because every track that I record, I'm learning something different. Like whether I'm recording a cello on this track or I'm recording a saxophone on this track, that first track might not have a saxophone or likely wouldn't, right? So then I would never have learned to do that saxophone had I not started doing a new track. Like everything you do is slightly different. Every track is different. And if you stick on one track for a year and a half, like you're only going to learn so much and improve by so much confined to that one track.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And kudos to you for sharing the music that you're making.
Hmm.
I definitely have. I like to call it like songs collecting hard drive dust on my hard drive, where it's like, how is this not out? Like, or songs that have been out that have been taken down, and it's just a
Hmm.
whole roller coaster of emotions. And it's
Sure.
just like I just want people to hear the stuff that we make,
Yeah.
you know. And there's been successful artists with that business model.
Hmm.
So it seems like the right thing to do. I've always heard like catalog is king or content is king.
Hmm.
So it's not just like the one song, it's the catalog, it's the body of work you're creating that's
Catalog
going
is
to.
king. That's really interesting. See, I've heard content is king, but catalog is king is very interesting. I've heard content is king and quality is queen. I think
Ooh,
it was either that or consistency is queen. I don't remember which one. I think it was quality because
I like both.
they pair. Yeah, right. So content is king and quality is queen, but quality comes with quantity.
Yeah,
So the more
yeah.
you do
It's
it,
like
the better you get.
100%,
But
100%.
it's
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 not
a,
just that one song.
exactly. Yeah, and that's a super super strong perspective for artists to hear that are, just beginning or at any stage, right? But that we put, at least in myself, I put so much pressure on every song when I first started. I was like, this is the song that's going to change my career, change my life. And it was so paralyzing to some degree because I was like, it has to be perfect. And if it wasn't, like, I was so stressed, right? But now, like, I take that pressure off because, like you said, it's the catalog. And, like, one bad song, 10 bad songs, 20 bad songs. How many times does an artist put out a record of 15 songs and they suck? But they're still a top 10 artist, you know what I mean? Like, how many times has, like, these huge artists release terrible albums and they're still around? Because it's the catalog that really matters, not just the specific song, right?
Yeah, yeah. And it's like you might hear an artist venture off into something that is like a passion thing for them,
Yeah.
where it's like the albums or projects before, they might have been more commercial friendly or consumer friendly.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, well, what happened to that sound that I fell in love with? It's like, oh, that was the whole point of that project, was for you to fall in love with me. Now I want you to hear
very
is
interesting. Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's very interesting. Yeah, come along, capturing the net and then coming along for the journey for whoever sticks around.
100%, 100%. But I mean, major labels know what they're doing. I mean, anyone like there's plans.
So interesting.
There's plans.
Yeah. It's also I want to say, not that I think that concept applies not only for artists but even for people in the engineering and producing field as well. Like, don't feel that every single track has to, like, you can release bad mixes, quote unquote. And so it's like, don't put all this pressure on yourself to make the perfect mix, because like you said, it's the consistency of catalog that really defines. You look at some of these huge people in the industry that have all these, like, Grammys and all these nominations and stuff, and that's only on a handful of the tracks that they've worked on. You see, like, some of these top tier producers, engineers, mastering artists, they do thousands of tracks, and maybe 15 of the 5,000 they've done, it has the nominations, and now they're regarded as some of the top in the industry. But that means that there's 4,985 that weren't, it's but we don't see that. I love this quote, and it says that people don't remember your at bats, they only remember your home runs.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, that's 100% true. It's definitely not what have you done for me lately, or what not have, oh boy. It's definitely not what have you done for me. It's what have you done for me lately. And, like, lately, have you hit a home run?
Yeah.
So it's like, when the iron's hot in this industry, definitely you want to strike.
Yeah.
Like, if your name is in people's mouths, it's like, you want to be doing great work. You want to be consistent, and put out great quality stuff.
Yeah, it's super, super interesting, man. I had a question for you related to this whole topic, and it totally escaped my mind. Oh shoot, what was it? We were talking about quality of content and releasing content. I actually have no idea what I was going to say.
Oh, it was something for engineers in this world. Oh, with mixing, like if you're signing off on a mix that you weren't super happy with.
We take all this pressure.
I think that's kind of like the last place we were, but yeah, I mean, it's kind of, you got to know what you're bringing to the table, and what might not be perfect for you is perfect for the artist's vision or client's vision.
Oh yeah.
And then it's like, well, it goes back to, like, this is not my record. If I'm mixing this record, my job is to balance it out and make it as exciting as possible to the client's ear.
Yeah.
I gotta reflect that image that this person's seeing in their head gotta try to reflect it coming through the speakers.
Practical tip for the listener: when you disagree, how do you respectfully say that you disagree initially? And then if the artist pushes back, then you say, okay, sounds good, you hands off kind of thing. But how would you bring up the fact that, like, it's like, hey, creatively, I think we should go in this direction?
Oh, I just tell them straight up, especially if it's someone I know. If it's someone I'm just started working with, I might suggest, like, I think these ad libs are muddying things up. I think we could probably mute a few of these. But yeah, communication is so important, not just in a session. It's super important in a session, but just communication is just important throughout every single step of the process. If you can't communicate to someone that their timing is funky at this one part, you're probably not going to be able to communicate this mixed note that you have that's that's a counterpoint to an artist's
Mm-hmm.
mix note, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just, if you're an engineer, even if you're a producer, you should have some type of um, fundamental background on how to communicate your vision.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really all about vision and ideas, what we're doing. Artists kind of get a pass because they're in their artist world, you know,
Mm-hmm.
like I can only imagine what goes on through the mind of some of these artists, you know. I can only imagine.
Oh
You know,
yeah.
I feel like I'm like looking at the doorway, but I have no clue what goes on in the room. You know.
For sure.
So yeah, so they get a pass if they want me to. If they tell me that they want the music to feel more silky, I'll be like, all right, let's make this thing feel silky.
Sure.
I'll try to like make that silky vision in my head come through the speakers.
Oh, that's the best, man. I totally know what you mean, man. It's too funny. It is too
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, you hear some very interesting. Uh, what? Give me one of the best examples that you had that come to mind of like the strangest analogy you've heard. Be like, I want this to sound blank.
They all run together, honestly. I could probably pull up an email and be like, "Oh, that one's weird." Um, an example of a weird one. I don't have an example of like one weird one that comes to mind. I do have an example of like, I guess if you want to know like a pet peeve, it's just like the laundry list of notes
Oh,
where it's just like,
sure.
whoa. It's one thing to be detail oriented. I think we're in the industry of fine details. You know, like I said before, it's not one big thing that makes or break a record. It's 100 little things, 1,000 little things that
That's
have to come
very
together.
interesting.
Yeah, it's all these little things that need to be just right. And so we are in the business of fine details. But when it comes to a mix, it's volume notes are the biggest faux pas for me or whatever, because volume's like the grade school number one basic tool that every mix engineer has. So it's like you're just telling me to turn something up. That's probably not the right move. It probably needs to be compressed different, or it needs to be EQ'd in a certain way so it pops to a speaker, you know? So it's, you have to have a crystal ball as an engineer, as a producer, because you have to take what that person's saying. You have to understand what you do as an engineer, as a producer, and they might want that thing louder, but really that means, oh, I need to compress it differently or EQ it differently
Yeah.
or take less reverb on, whatever it may
Hmm.
be. I need to get that element that they're making a note about to either pop less or pop more, or pop less.
Yeah, it's too funny, man. And like you mentioned, actually, you're not the first person to have mentioned the fact of, like the laundry list. So artists listening to this, definitely keep in mind the fact of like, first of all, be very specific with what you want, and second of all, producers and engineers typically don't enjoy the fact of when you send, bullet points A1 through 56. It's like, all right, hold on, I think we're missing something here. That app, you know,
Yeah, on verse one, it's like if we're
yeah.
working on bullet points A through 56, we probably didn't get it right in the production phase or post
Oh,
production phase. So
polishing a
you probably
turd.
sent this. Well, yeah. It's like you asked me to mix the record. You didn't ask me to then tune your vocals. If there's something I hear that I can do real quick, I'm always going to try to make the best
Sure.
record. But it goes into setting expectations when you take a gig,
Mm,
and it's like you're asking me to
mm,
mix this. I hope you did all the things that you wanted to get done to the record before the
mm,
mix phase. Because when you're mixing, you're thinking about balancing and making things sound interesting.
mm,
You don't want to have to worry about edits.
mm. In your mixing phase, does that include like adding things like delay and reverb, or is that more of in the
Yeah.
production phase?
I mean, yes, that is in the production phase, 100%. If you want that weekend vocal, you're probably not waiting to the mix phase.
Mm,
You know, while the song's getting recorded, that verby, ambient vocal is probably already in the
yeah,
record.
yeah, yeah.
You know, so then it's like, did we go too far with it? Did we not go far enough? Where are we going here? Oh, that delay throw on that word might be tight. Let's try it. Let's see if they say anything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Man, it's such an interesting industry, and so many different factors make like you said, so many different factors make a good song, man. And we're all dissecting it one day at a time.
Well, yeah, one day at a time, one record at a time. definitely I hear things that like change my perspective on like what the contemporary, not like every day, but you hear something come out this summer and then you're like, oh, is that where things are heading?
Hmm.
Like, are more records going to sound like this? Whether it be lyrical content, whether it be sonics, yada yada. So it's a lot to think about when you're making your own stuff or what the market is like. And then people will tell you not even to worry about that because, make it, if
Ain't
you
that
don't
the
like
truth?
it at the end of the day, probably no one else is going to like it.
Yeah.
So
Ain't that the truth?
make what, like we said earlier, make what you want to hear.
Ain't
Make more of what you want to hear.
that is so true, man. Now, another specific question before we wrap it up. We had mentioned obviously talking into the pop route of vocal lining and stuff and layering vocals. How often are you seeing in like the more like rock indie stuff the layering of vocals?
How often are you seeing rock indie stuff these days? This is the first question. I feel like it's definitely kind of been
That's a
it's
great
still
counter.
around.
Let's
It's
rephrase
still
that to
around.
more like okay, let's talk about like pop rock, I guess is the better stuff. Like things like the James Bays or the that genre. Like what Ed Sheeran used to be, the Adeles, like that stuff where it's
Hmm.
not like bubblegum pop, hearing on Z100. You're hearing more of like I don't know, what genre would you call it? Pop rock? Piano rock?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Just I would just probably call it pop, indie pop, or pop alternative. Yeah, it's not
Yeah, that's a
bubblegum
good one.
pop, but it's like pop
Indie
alternative, I
alternative pop.
guess. Alternative pop. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, so I feel like the hip hop genre and the rap genre kind of have set the precedent for we're talking about like what contemporary stuff is, and you hear vocal stacks on that a lot. You hear
Hmm.
like shit tons of vocals,
Hmm.
stacks of just like the hook, so it sounds super fat. Um, multiple ad libs with different tones. Maybe they brought in that choir, so there's a vocal choir or something. So modern vocal production is just a big part of contemporary music. You're
Yeah.
gonna hear you're
Yeah.
gonna hear stacks on
Yeah.
almost every record, I'd say.
What
You'll
are
you'll get that intimate one vocal record every now and then, but you're
mm,
gonna hear stacks.
what is one do not with vocal stacking?
Oh, you don't need seven different harmonies in one part. You know, it's like it kind of goes into like music theory.
Mm,
There's only so many notes that are going to make a chord before the chord just starts to sound like
mush.
gray noise,
Yeah.
mush. Yeah, it's like there's
Yeah.
only so many notes that are going to make up a chord.
Yeah.
So, uh, I always think three is a good number. That's like the Beatles thing.
Mm,
Four can get super cool because then you can add maybe a little tension note or something.
mm-hmm.
Um, so watch your harmony notes. You don't need five, six, seven, eight, nine different harmony notes, IMO. Um, yeah, watch like the number too. I guess you don't need to waste your time recording eight different
Mm-hmm.
doubles. Four is plenty. Two is probably even good enough, but I think four is where it's at. Do not don't print your auto tunes. Yeah, don't do that.
Because then you're
Wait,
stuck with
wait
what?
for
Yeah.
wait for a producer to make that decision. If they ask you to print the
Oh
auto tune.
yeah, man.
But don't
How
don't
many
be
times have we
cavalier
done
and print the
that?
auto tune.
Oh shoot.
Yeah, it's like,
And then
and also
now
is
you start auto tuning the auto tune because you realize that there's a note that you messed up and now you have to auto tune the auto tune note.
yeah, and it's never gonna sound right. It's
No.
always gonna sound computery or
Yeah,
whatever.
so
Yeah,
true,
it's
man.
like
But then
yeah, and
99.9% of the time, the audience is never going to notice that. But it's we who notice that stuff, man. When have you ever heard a typical music listener be like, yeah, this that note sounded a little computery. I don't know about that song. You know what I mean?
not many listeners these days, honestly. Definitely not many listeners like under the age of like 25 or whatever.
Sure,
Like
man.
it's
It's so
like,
funny.
you're gonna sound like a old head or whatever you want to call it if you're like, did they use autotune?
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, of course they use autotune, dude. Like there's autotune everywhere in the world right now.
It's too funny.
The coolest thing, haven't you heard it?
Yeah. And sliced bread, bro. Best thing
Yeah,
since
for
sliced
real.
bread. Oh, it's too funny, man. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time. I like to wrap up all these chats with my favorite question. What is one thing that you currently know now in your music career that you wish you knew when you first started?
Oof, oof. One thing I wish I knew now that I wish I knew when I first started. Um, I wish I talked to clients this with the same confidence or whatever I talk to
Mm.
them now. But that comes with years of eating shit. Or
Hmm.
not even eating shit, but just like years of like learning,
Yeah.
being a student, you
Yeah.
know? So I wish I just had the knowledge that I it's a terrible way to answer your question, but yeah, wish I knew everything that I knew now when I first started.
You know what though? To some degree, I think that can be summed up with try to learn as much as you can.
Yeah, yeah.
Because that's what it really is. The knowledge you have is you just learning experience, and don't think you know everything, but like keep learning, and that experience and confidence will come.
Yeah, I you know what I'd say I'd be like, don't hesitate to dive into that manual.
Mm.
Don't hesitate to hit the Google when you don't know something,
Yeah, man. I have
you
a
know.
degree at YouTube University. Man, you know how much I
Yeah.
learned off of that?
Yeah, man. It's like we're in like an information age
Sure.
and there's so much information out there. So if like you're looking for an answer, the answer you're looking for is out there.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool, man. Well, I really appreciate you. If you get to hang out for 30 more seconds, I want to say a big thank you to every single person that watched this or listened to this, however you ended up viewing or enjoying, consuming the content. Appreciate you very much. Definitely go check out AJ's stuff, and his links will all be in the description. And best way to support the channel is checking out my own original music. Consider subscribing on whatever platform you're listening to. Have a wonderful day. God bless and peace out.
God bless. Thank you, Jacob, for the platform. Thank you.
Hey, man, my pleasure. Thank you.